Okay, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we begin a very apropos parsha to the times that we live in at the moment. In general, the Alter Rebbe said, the first Chabad Rebbe said, a Jew needs to live with the times. What does it mean, live with the times? It doesn't mean get caught up on current affairs. It means to actually study the Torah portion of the week. For in the Torah portion of the week, you will find everything that you need to know about the current affairs, about everything that's happening in the world. And that will give you the answers and solve a lot of the dilemmas that you may be dealing with. So we look today in this week's parasha of Shelach, which is the exact portion that deals with the Jewish people entering into the land of Israel and some of the challenges they were facing psychologically, mentally, emotionally, about what the dangers of the land would provide and would cause. And so here we are in a very similar situation. We're very worried about the dangers of Eretz Yisrael. We're very worried about the fear of what will happen to Israel and to our brothers and sisters there. And of course, to us, if we go and our children who are there and so on, but it's more the Jewish people we're in danger. And so we look to this week's parasha to tell us perhaps we should see the most ancient story of the Jews giving up hope. And that unfortunately did not end well, to be learning the lessons from that a Jew never loses hope in the gift that Hashem gave us, which is Israel. And so I just thought I'd share by introduction, there are two things that we can so far just sort of recalibrate in what we're going through over the last 5 days. I don't know about you, but we found myself looking at, I'm running the war from my phone, basically. I'm in my situation room is like in all the different messages and social media posts and everything else that's happening. And, it's like every important place in the world has a situation room. Well, it started to become that your phone is your situation room, and every alert, every detail is drawing you in, and it can be very overwhelming and not healthy. Not healthy for the body, not healthy for the mind, to be that honed in on every specific detail, not just from your phones, but even on the computer or on TV or on CNN or on Fox News, whatever it may be. And there's two reasons why it's problematic. And it's important to know what's happening, but to pause from that intensity of it. Number one, when you are focused on the trees, you forget the forest. And you start noticing every little detail. And just now, I just mentioned one which I, sort of regret a little bit, about how Ahuva hasn't been sleeping for 4 nights in a row. But that's the detail, that's the tree, that's the specific of what this experience is. But if you take a step back and you remove yourself from some of the protim, the fine details of everything that happens, every alert, every rocket, every this, every that, how much damage and what's Israel hitting and where are they targeting next and have they got the nuclear, you can lose the fact that we are right now witnessing a moment in history not similar, not dissimilar to the Jews standing by the Red Sea after the Egyptians had been swallowed by the water. We've just witnessed how our most ominous and heinous foe that has threatened annihilation for the Jewish people for the last 30 years, and it's with all the Hamas and Hezbollah and everything else that's happened within the territories and terrorist attacks, that has all been small compared to the hovering dark cloud that there is a country with tremendous weaponry and large might, stronger in numbers than the Israeli army, that will annihilate Israel as soon as they get the chance. And he's been talking about it for 25 years, every time he goes to the UN, the Prime Minister, because it's lingering. And people say, well, it hasn't happened yet. We had the opportunity in, let's say, 1935 to get rid of Hitler and say, well, because it hasn't happened yet, therefore maybe we'll let him off the hook. You'd be a fool, more than a fool. You'd potentially be complicit to the murder if you had a chance to take them out and stop that from ever happening. So we unfortunately know that when somebody claims that they want to kill us, to believe them. It's happened too many times in history that we say, nah, they're just kidding around, they're just joking, they don't really mean it. No, unfortunately, we saw Hamas broke through, and they showed us what they're capable of if they get the chance. They broke through that wall. And so it's not a question of what the consequences of war is, it's the question of what the consequences of not going to war is. That's really what Israel has been grappling with for the last 30 years. And then to see what we've seen over the last 5 days, literally our enemy being swallowed up alive in a defeat that's akin to the 6-day war, maybe even bigger than that, because that was, they just paused with the ceasefire. This is a country that's on the brink of surrendering and losing everything. It took 10 years for us to find Osama bin Laden. It took 5 days to find 15 Osama bin Ladens in Iran. They're top 15 arch-terrorists. And so sometimes the big picture, you look back and you have to say, wow, Hashem, you are really protecting the Jewish people. You saved us. You saved us from what could have been. And yes, there were rockets, and yes, there was some dangers and some calamities and some very big damage that was done, and there were 25 lives lost. And that's a tragedy. But they estimated anywhere between 800 and 4,000 if they would attack Iran. Anywhere between 800 and 4,000 Jewish casualties in Israel. And that was because Hezbollah would join in and Hamas would join in, and they just would be overwhelmed. They wouldn't be able to stop it. And even with everybody going in bunkers, everybody going into a bunker, they still estimated that. And so what ends up happening is we start to focus on the detail and we forget what is really happening, this massive, unbelievable victory that Hashem is really handing to us in a way that we'll probably talk about it, and we'll probably give the details of it, and we'll probably make a Megillah about it in the future generations as we start to unfold and unpack everything that's been happening.
You know where the chargers for the...
I don't. I'm sorry, Gabby. So that's one thing. Why it's sometimes wise not to get too stuck in every detail and every nuance and everything, because what you miss is the big picture here, and we feel it. I think every Jew feels like there's something extraordinary happening, and there's something tremendous in the protection that we've been blessed with, and in the way that this enemy has just completely crumbled. And yes, we're still worried. Maybe they have one last thing. Maybe they're desperate. Maybe there'll be something still scary, but as it stands right now, it's literally the miracles of akin to the swallowing up of the Egyptians at the sea. Our enemy, our fierce enemy, we're stunned. We're watching stunned. No one knows how to react. And then we need a Moshe or Miriam to come and tell us, hey guys, we got to sing. You got to be happy that the Jewish people lives. And we've removed arch enemies. Not only have we removed Iran, we've removed all their proxies. They're basically folding and closing shop. For 30 to 40 years, there's been a constant threat and intimidation and murders. And we always said, it's too dangerous to travel to Israel. It's too dangerous. How many threats are there? You can't go here. You can't go there. We're worried about when's the next war happening? When's the next war happening? This is it. This is the end of all of those threats of war. There is no longer that frontline enemy of the Jewish people. And what we hope will be that all the moderate Arab countries that have created peace, or at least quasi-peace, will now realize Israel flexed their muscles and showed us who they are. And we respect them, and we'll recognize them, and maybe even more than that. We'll leave that up to Hashem. That's number one. Number two is that we have to be part of this. We have to be part of this rising lion. We can't be spectators. We can't just be the ones sitting like couch potatoes while the army and Israel and the leadership is everything is making all the moves. If we're part of the nation, we're part of the Jewish people, then we have to be part of it. So how can we be part of it? So what's rising lion? I spoke about it a little bit on Shabbos. It says in the Shulchan Aruch, it says a lion is how we should wake up in the morning. Get up like a lion. The time is a flying. It's time to say Modeh Ani. There's a song. Wake up, you sleepyhead. Lift your head out of bed. His orari, orari. Wake up like a lion. What does that mean? You jump up and you say, I'm ready to serve Hashem today. I'm going to say Shema, I'm going to daven, I'm going to pray, I'm going to do a mitzvah. I'm going to do several mitzvahs. I'm going to add positivity to the world. I am part of this force that is the rising lion, that is doing my share in my place, in my sphere of influence, that I can help this victory and this spiritual shift. Because this is not a physical win, this is a spiritual win that's happening right now. And so we have to be part of that spiritual wind that's going on for the Jewish people at the moment. So we need to sort of take away a little bit of the, I have to monitor every little detail and have to worry about every step. And yeah, life still goes on. You have to go to work, you have to wake up, but with a different type of energy, saying, I'm part of this in some way, shape, or form, and I have to do my part. And we do. That way we'll connect to the entire experience and all the Jews who are there. And they'll feel it, and we'll feel them. So those are just my two ways of introduction, saying of sort of the approach of where we need to be right now. Having said that, it's still a little bit cautious and a little bit scary, but exhilarating and exciting at the same time. What could be the future for our people? So here, the Jewish people were in a similar state. They were in a similar state where they were about to prepare to go into the land of Israel. Page 808. They're about to go into the land of Israel, and what's happening? They're exhilarated. They're excited. We're going to go into Israel. But at the same time, they were scared and they were fearful about what it would undertake, what would occur, what they would be faced with. What? Sorry. My bad. 898. What their challenges would be. So Moshe sort of wants to preempt this. He sees there's a little bit of nervous tension in the air about going into Israel. So he wants to preempt what's happening. So what does he do? He says, I think we should send some scouts, not really spies, scouts, to just tell us what we should be prepared for. What are the easiest parts of the land to conquer? How do we get in? How do we get out? What's the plan for setting it up? What kind of produce is there? And just the details of the land. So he says, I think if they come back and they say, guys, this is a good land. This is really a great place Hashem's promised us. It'll lift the morale. People will get a little excited. We'll get a little bit pumped. Remember, they had actually gone down to Egypt temporarily from Israel. Abraham, Sarah were told, go to Israel. This is your land. They started there. They built a family there. Yitzchak never left Israel. Rivka married him in Israel, and they had children. They had children, of course, Yaakov and Esav. Esav left. He went to Seir. He went to north, Syria, Turkey, up north, maybe even further than that. And Yaakov stayed there and raised his family with Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, and his 12 sons and daughters. And so what ends up happening, of course, they sell Yosef, go down to Egypt, run out of food. Long story short, the brothers go down to Egypt and they stay there because there's food there. And they say, well, we're going to go back to Israel very soon at some point once, the time is right. They even go back to bury Jacob there because he said, make sure you bury me in Egypt. And before Joseph died, he said, look, I was viceroy in Egypt. I couldn't leave, but I want you to bury me up in Israel as well. But they stayed there. They got comfortable, as Jews do in exile. And then they got enslaved by Pharaoh. So approximately 210 years from the day that they made their step down to Egypt, Moshe took them out of Egypt and they left. And now they're heading back to their promised land, to the land of their forefathers, the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So no one was still alive from that day, bar one woman. Her name was Serach bas Asher. Serach, the daughter of Asher, was still alive. She was the daughter of one of the 12 tribes, and she was still alive. Separate story. We'll talk about that another time. But she was there, and she's like, wow, I can't believe I'm heading back to where I was born, to my place of birth, even though she was very, very old. But she managed to merit to live that long. And they all heading back, but they hadn't been there. They hadn't seen it. There's no news. There's nowhere to know what's going on. As a matter of fact, they knew there were Canaanites and Hittites and Prizzites and Jebusites and all these Grizzites and all these other people that lived in the land. And they had probably exponentially grown and fortified themselves. They're not just little tribes anymore. It's been 210 years. So we're a bit nervous about what's going on. As a matter of fact, there was a time later in history, just to jump forward like 2,000 years, there was a time later in history when the Canaanites actually came to take the Jewish people to court, to Alexander the Great, and said, we are coming to you to adjudicate this case. We are the plaintiff. We believe that the Jews came and usurped us from our land. We were here first. It's even called the land of Canaan in the beginning. You look at the first verse, we had Torah at Eretz Canaan. They're going to go and scout out the land of Canaan. We had first dibs on it. We were here first, and the Jews came and took over after we came. So Alexander the Great turns to the Jewish rabbis, and they say, what is your answer? So the Jewish rabbis give a very basic answer, which is obvious from the Torah. They said, what is your claim to the land based on the Torah? That the Torah, the Jewish Bible, says it was called the land of Canaan before the Jews came, and so you were there first. Well, let's look at the Torah then. The Torah, that the first verse of the Torah is, I am the Lord your God, created heaven and earth. Bereshis bara Elokim, in the beginning, I created heaven and earth, is the same God, Rashi says, who gave the land of Israel to the Jews. So if you're using the Torah, you got to go all the way with the Torah. That is, God who created this world decided to give the land to the Jews. Maybe you were squatting there for a little while. You were there without permission. But once God decided he's allocating who should live there, it was the Jews. And your source is the Torah. Well, you got to follow it the whole way through. Second thing is, if you want to follow the Torah, Canaan was punished because Canaan was the son of Ham, who Ham was the son of Noach, who disrespected his father and treated him inappropriately after his father got drunk after the flood. Noach had PTSD, took to the bottle a little bit. Anyway, after seeing the whole world destroyed, it's no wonder that he suffered a little bit from that. And Ham poked some fun at him inappropriately. So he was cursed. He said, you're going to be a slave. And Ham, who was actually a dark-skinned individual, became the father of the slave nation. And it stayed slave nation for quite some time. And that was a punishment for the way he did. So that's in the Torah. It's not us picking out and choosing and saying, racist fables. It's in the Torah. And so the fact that happened means Canaan was a slave. Who is the slave? Who is the slave owner to? The children of Shem, the brother of Ham. Who was the children of Shem? The Jewish people. So they said to Alexander the Great, everything a slave owns belongs to the master. And so Canaan couldn't have owned the land as slave nation. It would have had to have been belonging to their master, which is the brother of the Shemites, and that's us. And so when they heard this, Alexander the Great said, you're using the document that you brought in as your proof. They're using the document as two proofs to say it's not yours. Sorry, you don't have a right to the land. And they indeed ran off. They ran off and they let the Jews remain in the land of Israel. This is during the time of the Second Temple. So it's very clear that everybody in the world knew that this land was specifically given to the descendants of Abraham as the Jewish homeland. And so here, what they were worried about was they're going to know we're coming to get our land back, and they're going to fortify themselves and strengthen themselves. So Moshe sees this nervous energy, and he says, I'm going to send some scouts. Now, this wasn't Hashem's idea, and this was potentially an issue, because usually everything in the Torah was God's idea. God says, Moshe, you do this, it's my command. Look at the first verse. It says, send out men if you wish. If you wish. Oh, that's a bit of an opening. If Hashem says, if you want to, that would be a little bit of a red flag to somebody who would say, Hashem's not really excited about this. He's not really telling me I have to do it. He's saying, if you want to, if you think it'll make you and the Jewish people feel better, fine. And why was it Shelach Lecha, not a command from God? And the reason is because, spiritually speaking, it was a difficult objective. It was a difficult goal for the Jewish people, especially the upper echelon of Jews. And the reason being, because they had everything they wanted in the desert. They had the food coming down without any effort. They had water coming from the well of Miriam without any effort. They had their clothes never got dirty. The weather was perfect because of the clouds surrounding them. They never had a single enemy attack them for 40 years, a little bit in the beginning, a little bit at the end, but that was specific wars. And they really had a time they could study the new Torah, learn all of the new understanding of mitzvahs, and become very spiritual people. And they knew as soon as they would go into Israel, they would have to fight wars, They would have to get their hands dirty. And even after the wars, they would have to go and plow fields and dig and plant seeds and spend all their time working in the agricultural industry. They wouldn't have a chance to be as spiritual as they were today. So it's almost as if you chose the wrong people to go to send them as spies, because these were the ones who were the big learners. They were the ones studying. They were the spiritual ones. And they're like, yeah, nah. Yeah, nah. That's Australian. It's Australian is like, yeah, nah. You have to say yeah first and then nah to prove that it's really no. Like, you might think yes, but I say no. Right? That they were the ones who would have said, I'm sorry, this is just not. So they came back, and we're going to see, with a deliberate setup of why we shouldn't go to Israel. It's not smart, it's not good. Look, the land, they use a line, the land that swallows its inhabitants. What does that mean? It means that the work in the business that you're going to be in is going to take up all of your time. You're not going to be able to do any spiritual work. You're not going to be able to daven. You're not going to be able to learn. How many people tell me, Rabbi, I wish I had more time for classes. I wish I had more time to pray in the morning. I have to be at work at this time and I have to get things done and I have to accomplish and I have my kids and I have this. And they're telling me all the things they're juggling. I don't have time for this. That's what they were saying. It's a land that swallows the inhabitants instead of allowing them to do what they choose. And so they were the Moshe's choice, not necessarily the right choice for the job. Now, it's interesting, the Kli Yakar, who's a sage of the 1400s, he says, great sage, commentary on the Torah, and he says that had Moshe sent women, it would have been a whole different story. They would have come back with a lot more faith, with a lot more promise, because they would have recognized that spirituality is not an escape of the physical world, it's an immersion in the physical world. You see, men, don't you realize the only times we feel a little spiritual is when we're studying Torah, davening with our tefillin on, connecting to Hashem in a practical mitzvah way. While a woman does not require that in her prescription of spiritual growth and connectedness, and she could find a connection to Hashem in the making of a meal, in the going for a walk, in the walking through a mall, in the going to a Panthers game, in the doing of the laundry. She can find spirituality that's embedded within those things because her job as a nurturer is to bring out the holiness that already exists. A man who is a conqueror has to get rid of that which is bad and that which is not good and instead replace it with something that is good and build that positivity. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. And so when people say, why do men have all the physical mitzvahs and women don't have those requirements, it's because of the soul makeup requires that type of connection. Now, the interesting thing is the 3 special mitzvahs for a Jewish woman all enhance a spirituality that is already there, not created from an empty space. For example, tefillin, just have to create something in the morning to connect with. You're holding onto the rope. If you don't hold onto the rope, you're lost. You become the second time I'm using this expression, a couch potato, and watching the movies and drinking beer, and that's it. So the woman can take the Friday night, it's not so bad, right? You can take the Friday night, which is a regular evening, and illuminate what's already there for everyone to see. This is really Shabbos, not just Friday night. We created in this home a beautiful atmosphere of holiness. And the man's like, wow, I never noticed this. The woman was able to bring it out and illuminate that which was already there. And then you have the same thing with challah, where the special mitzvah of the woman is to separate challah, make food, which is really just a physical, menial thing to survive, almost a selfish product of survival, and turns it into a way in which we can connect to Hashem through the holiness of the bread becoming, which is the bread is the staple of food, becoming something that became a mitzvah and holy connected to Hashem. So now the man looks at the woman and says, you were able to find holiness in a sandwich? It's unbelievable. I just eat the sandwich because I'm hungry. It tastes good. And then the same thing happens with mikvah, where intimacy doesn't just become about lust and about physical pleasure. It becomes about creating something more sacred, something more holy, something more uplifting and spiritual. So there you have the examples of why the women's mitzvahs are chosen as the revealing state of spirituality as opposed to the creating state of spirituality. And that's really why the Kli Yakar, I believe his name is Lunshitz, Rabbi Lunshitz, says that if women would have gone, they would have come back and said, we see it. There's nothing to escape from. We don't need to stay in the desert. We can do this. We can create the holiness within this physical land. I see it. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case. He sent the top of the rank scholars, learners who just wanted to come back and escape. And unfortunately, they did it in the wrong way because they didn't even give that as the reason. It was a cover-up. They just said, no, it's a bad land. They used a few allusions to it. Like I mentioned, it's a land that it consumes its inhabitants, but the people just got so turned off. And the people said, I can't believe, Moshe, you would bring us out of Egypt to be massacred and to be destroyed and to be basically lost as a people in this foreign, barren, destructive land, because that's how they made it sound. Aside from two people, Kalev and Yehoshua, we'll look at this inside a little bit. So he sent one man from Israel. The question then becomes why Moshe made this mistake, but it's beyond the scope of this class to see what Moshe was trying to accomplish by sending these men. If you want, I can touch on it very briefly, but it will require a whole nother endeavor to really understand it properly. I'll touch on it in a little taste, little Vorspeise. And that is that there's two ways we can become holy individually. There's faking it, and then there's really being holy. I don't mean faking it. I mean changing your clothes, so to speak. From wearing dirty clothes to wearing clean clothes. People think, oh, he's a clean person. It's just your clothes, though. It's just your appearance. And in spiritual terms, we have clothing. What is this clothing? It's our speech, it's our actions, and it's even our focused thought. That becomes our clothing. So in reality, every single human being is able to control those three things. It's very easy to control your actions. You want to bop somebody over the head, but you don't, right? You want to say something a little bit harder to control, but you can and not say it, or say something nice. And then you have thoughts. Well, that's the hardest to control, but you can shift your obsessive thoughts to something else. You can control it. You can take off the thought and say, I'm going to think about something else. Oh, look, a puppy, right? So you can do that. But you can't change your emotions, at least most humans in a state of constant battle between animal and godly soul can't change their emotional state. Meaning we have a desire for something. You're going to have a desire for something. You can control it. You can say, don't do it, don't say it, don't think it, but you can't control the essence of what is your driving emotional state, right? If you happen to be somebody who is happy all the time, or sad all the time, or angry all the time, or calm all the time, or an extrovert or an introvert, these are very hard things to change. Almost impossible to change your nature to that degree. Now, Moshe was a tzaddik, and he said, we can get the Jews to change their whole nature. You have 7 emotions, you have 3 garments. The 7 emotions were represented in the 7 nations of the land of Canaan that lived there at the time. And he felt that these spies would not only check out the land from a physical perspective, they would look at the land spiritually and say, these 7 nations represents the ability that we have to change our nature, our 7 emotions from physical, the Egypt way in which we've lived our lives for the last few generations, to the new Israel godly way that we can start to think and act and feel in every part of our lives. Moshe said, I did it. I was able to transform fully my emotional state to be connected to Hashem. Israel is the key for everyone to be able to do it. And these spies can help get it done. They are holy, they're good, they will help get it done. And what's interesting is Joshua later on sends a couple of spies to Jericho when they're about to go into the land of Israel. They're actually in already. And he says, go check out Jericho and see how best to conquer it. And people, commentaries are like, what? You didn't get burnt from sending spies? You don't remember 40 years ago? The whole thing, the mistake, the disaster? And Joshua said, yes. This is a garment spy job. This is they're just checking one city, conquerable, understanding that through this city will be the opening, the doorway to the land of Israel, which the doorway to our land of Israel is our garments, is our speech, action, and our thoughts. So Joshua realized that Moshe was trying to do too much with his spies. And he changed it to say, let's do what we are capable of doing. As I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg of a very deep subject, but that's the idea what Moses might have been thinking beneath the surface. To understand the timing of this, the Jews go to this spot in the south of Israel, and they're going in to check. It was actually, they went from the south to the north to search out the land from Midbar Paran. And these 12 scouts were the best of the volunteers. They were volunteers. These weren't the heads of the tribes. We know the heads of the tribes from last week. Last week, the heads of the tribes had different names than these, so they weren't the head, but they were volunteers. They came up to Moshe or came up to their tribal leaders and said, "We'll go." And they said, "Okay, you're the best of my tribe, so you'll go from the best of the volunteers." Now, Joshua was the best of the tribe of Ephraim, and Caleb was from the best of the tribe of Yehuda. Now, they were the real deal. They knew that there was a chance that the others might have a little lashon hara against the land. They knew that, but they still felt we might be able to convince them. We might be able to stay strong and tell them that this is really a good land. How do we know that they had a hunch? Well, two reasons. Number one, before Joshua left, Moses calls him in and says, "Joshua, you're going to need a little strength here. In case the others start to say negative things, I want to give you an extra strength to be able to convince them that it's good, that it's a good land. Don't let them sway you, because you're my successor." He already knew that from those two prophets that were wandering around the camp in last week's Torah portion, that after the 70 elders got a little prophecy. So they said, "Oh, we see that Moses is going to make it to the land of Israel and Joshua is going to take over." So Moshe said, "Look, if I don't make it to the land of Israel, you need to survive this little thing if it does go sideways. So I'm going to give you an extra yud on your name." His name was Hoshea, and he called him Yehoshua. He added the yud to his name. There's a lot to talk about. We'll wait for Shabbos to that, why he added the yud specifically. But he did that to fortify himself, to give him the humility, but also the power to be able to withstand it. Caleb had strength within himself already to stand strong, but he needed a little extra boost. So we're going to see that when everyone went up to the searching around the land of Israel in the north, Caleb said, "Hang on, guys. I'm going to go one place. I need to make a stop." Let's take a quick look, because I want to get to some of the interesting parts of it. Look at verse 22 on 901. So they got their instructions of what they're looking for in the land, to see what kind of land it is. And they went up to inspect the land, and they traveled westward along its southern border. And they went up through the south, right? That's what we mentioned before. Caleb came by himself to Hebron in order to visit the graves of the patriarchs and ask them to invoke God's mercy, that he not be persuaded to spy out the land as the others planned. So he knew that there may be a little bit of problem with the other folks, and he said, "I need to go and strengthen myself by praying at the graves of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah." And from here we actually learn one of the first times in history that when you need strength, you go to the graves of the righteous. When you need an extra blessing, when you need a connection that you don't know you're going to be able to get on your own, you go and ask for them to help their merits work on your behalf. You're not praying to them. Very important distinction. He wasn't praying to the patriarchs and matriarchs. He was praying for them to be able to use their merits to get the blessings from Hashem, to strengthen him, to keep him strong. And we have a similar custom today, where in a situation where we need extra blessings, extra strength, and someone to use their merits on our behalf, we go to the Montefiore Cemetery in Queens, where the Rebbe's resting place is, called the Ohel, and we do the same thing. We do exactly what Caleb did, that helped strengthen him and not be convinced and persuaded by the others. And so too, we ask for blessings that he will use his merit for. And so they went to the place of the Eshkol, the valley of Eshkol. And what did they do? They cut off a branch with a cluster of grapes, the famous picture of them carrying grapes look huge, massive grapes. And that was supposed to be Hashem showing them that, wow, look at this land, how it has such amazing produce. It is amazing about Israel, is that for a land that looks like a bit of a desert, it's amazing what's produced out of Israel. You ever walk around Israel for a bit and see like how much arid desert-like land there is? Well, you have yet to have that blessing, and you have yet to have that blessing, and you have yet to have that blessing. We have too many people here that haven't made it to Eretz Yisrael yet. So this is a parsha for you. Don't ever miss the opportunity because of fear, because of something that may be impeding you. Rather say, I will be like Yeshua and Kalev, and I will go and look at the best of the land and say, wow, what a gift. I need to see this. I need to be a part of this. And so Hashem was showing them that this is what can happen. You can have this amazing fruit growing out of what looks like a desert. What is Israel famous for? They're famous for their olives. Olive trees literally grow in deserts. They're famous for their pomegranates. They're famous for their figs. They're famous for their date palms. You go down to the Dead Sea. It is the hottest place in Israel. You get to the intersection where you can go left up to the Jordan Valley or right down to the Dead Sea, and you just see hundreds, if not thousands, of date palms in the middle of the most arid, desert-looking land. And they're green date palms with dates growing. It's the most beautiful thing, and you realize Hashem has just blessed this land and given it unbelievable power to grow things that naturally might not be able to be grown. And we don't have any real rivers or lakes. Yeah, there's Kinneret up the north, but it's all based on the blessings of rain from Hashem. And then, of course, the innovation that God gave us with the drip irrigation system. That, of course, we were blessed with the knowledge, the wisdom, and the wherewithal to be able to invent a magnificent system that would help things grow even in all seasons. You go to a place like Arad, which is in the middle of a desert in the Negev, and all of a sudden you're like, why is there so much green grass here? It doesn't make sense. It's like a golf course in the middle of a desert. It doesn't make sense. But that's what's happened with all of these things coming together, especially God's blessings. Now, what ended up happening, I'll just give you a short little footnote story in history. King Solomon hired some people from the north, Phoenicia, actually, to build the temple to help construct. Hiram came, and he was a brilliant woodworking man. He was a carpenter par excellence, best in the world. So Solomon said, I'm going to hire the best carpenter in the world to design and build the Beit HaMikdash. And as a reward, he said, thank you for your efforts. I'm going to give you a section of the land of Israel to live in. You can live in this part of Israel. And he said it was a very beautiful area. He started living there with his people for about 6 months, and he comes back to Shlomo and he says, it's a terrible place. Nothing grows here. Shlomo said, what are you talking about? The Jews lived there, and they grew all these beautiful trees and beautiful vineyards and everything else. He said, well, nothing's growing here. It's terrible land. And then Shlomo realized that the blessing only works for the Jewish people, which is why throughout the time that the Jews were not in Israel, nobody wanted to live there. Nobody ever wanted to live there. It was swampland. Mark Twain went to Israel in the 1800s, late 1800s, and he said, why would anybody want to live here? This place is a barren land. There's nothing but rocks and sand and shrubs and nothing doing, and nobody wanted it. Even in the time where the Crusaders came and then the Muslim conquest came, no one really lived in Israel. They had the status of being in Jerusalem, but it wasn't for the prosperity, it wasn't to build cities. Tel Aviv was only built in 1901, 1902. It started to be built by Jewish people. And so too with all the other areas of land. So it's important to note that no one ever wanted Israel until the Jews had it, until the Jews showed what can be done with it. Because whatever they tried over the 2,000 years of Jews not being there, 1,900 years, couldn't do anything with it. So not only is it a blessing from Hashem for the land, it's a blessing Hashem for Jews in the land. All the Esrogim that we have come from there, all the Lulavim, all the Hadassim, we think about all, from grapes that make all the wine, Again, in barren desert, there's grapes being grown that taste some of the best wine. It doesn't really stack up in normal logical plants and agricultural fields. Be that as it may, they came back with these big things because Hashem wanted to show them the potential of the land, and they were using it to scare the people. They were using it to say, look, there are giants there, and this is the kind of fruit that grow there, and they're scary, scary people. And the truth is, there were some giants there. There were descendants of Og who actually were very large in size, and they looked a little intimidating. But nobody caused them any trouble. Nobody tried to kill them. Nobody tried to chase them. They just almost created this fear out of themselves. And this leads me to probably the most important part of the portion, which I want to tie back to the situation we're in right now.
David versus Goliath?
Sorry?
David versus Goliath?
Not quite, but that's in another section. But that's.
No, I know it's not like here, but kind of.
I want to give you the report of what happened when they came back. Right? So they came back, and what did they say to the Jewish people on their return? So they started off in verse 27 with nice line. We came to the land you sent us, and it is indeed flowing with milk and fig honey. There's dates and figs, and really this is its fruit. It's magnificent. But I want you to know the people who inhabit it, this is on side 900, are extraordinarily mighty. The cities are fortified, huge, and even saw the big giants there. The Amalekites dwell in the south. You know about the Amalekites because they attacked us when we came out of Egypt. The Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountain region. The Canaanites dwell on the coast along the Jordan River. And we are in trouble. So they're already, people are getting antsy. People are getting worried. So Kalev saw the other spies were turning against the people of Moses. So he silenced the people who were starting to murmur. And he said, oh, wait. You know, Moses, and they thought, oh, he's going to say bad stuff about Moses. And he says, no, Moses took us out of Egypt. He took us to this point. He gave us the Torah. He's given us food. He's given us land. He's given us water and man. Surely we can overcome it just as we have overcome everything else. But the men who had gone up with him said, no, we can't go up against the people. They're stronger than him. They said him, they're maybe even referring to Hashem. And they gave an evil report to the Israelites about the land they inspected. This is the land we traveled, was inspected, a land that consumes its inhabitants, as we mentioned. And the people we saw are men of unnaturally great size. Look at what it says in verse 33. Second half of the verse. We seem to ourselves as tiny grasshoppers next to them, and so did we seem to them. Now, try to understand that line. That's almost the last line they used before everybody started crying and screaming. Everybody began crying and screaming, saying, woe is us, we're done for. Why should we go to Egypt? Why should we go to Israel? Let's go back to Egypt. What's that last line? What does that last line say? We seem to ourselves as grasshoppers, and so we became like grasshoppers in their eyes. I don't have to really explain this because it's so self-evident. They didn't look small to the Canaanites. They looked small in their own eyes, in the eyes of the Canaanites. And because they looked at themselves as small in the eyes of the Canaanites looked at them as tiny, small, easily defeatable people. All begins and ends with the way we view ourselves and our position in the land of Israel, and our right to be there, and our God that we have supporting us, and our history that proves all of that. The moment we start to question our own legitimacy and our own strength, and we start to become embarrassed, and like the person who told me, Rabbi, I don't know if I can wear a yarmulke to my trip to Europe this summer. This is somebody who's a little bit more religious. And I said, you are a grasshopper in your own eyes. Forget about anybody else. Forget about anybody else. You're a grasshopper in your own eyes. You see yourself as small, as insignificant, as shamed, as a little bit knocked down, as a bit embarrassed. Not saying you should do things to put yourself in harm's way, God forbid. Maybe don't go on vacation to places where everyone's hostile and hates Jews. Maybe don't do that. But it starts with your approach, with your feeling, because the moment you are embarrassed, they will jump all over that and they will say, hey, look at these grasshoppers, because you saw yourself as a grasshopper. It's all an illusion. It's like the movie The Matrix. You ever saw the movie The Matrix, the first one? As soon as you see yourself as being fallible, as being someone who can be mortal, you become mortal. As soon as you see yourself as, and the world around you, in the computer code that it is, you're untouchable. And that's the code of recognizing that Hashem is supporting us. Hashem gave us this gift. You know why Hashem punished the Jews so severely for this? Probably because of this line. I give you a gift. I haven't given you a gift. I gave you the Torah, but this is just a pure gift. I'm showing you how the land is going to be so fertile. It's going to be so amazing. It's going to have so many blessings that come for you from this land. Yes, you might have some bad neighbors, some bad actors around you, but you will be blessed beyond your imagination in this land like no other country. It's got the mountains of Tzfas and the Hermon, just like the Swiss Alps. It's got the craters of the Ramon crater in the Dimona area by the Negev, just like the Grand Canyon. It'll have the beaches of the western side. It'll look just as magnificent as the beaches of Florida. It'll have the history and the spiritual beauty in Jerusalem as much as like you are going on your way to heaven. It will have the vineyards and the fields and the areas of beautiful, luscious waterfalls, and you will have everything in this land. There won't be anything that you won't have. And what's amazing is how much is in Israel. You have natural springs coming out of the ground more than any other place proportionately in the world. Chamei Tveria, hot springs coming up. Ein Gedi, cold springs coming up in the middle of a desert. Dead Sea, Kinneret Sea, the sea which has more fish life than any other lake in the world. More different species of fish. And the amazing thing is that Hashem did it as a gift for us, to give us this gift. And what do? We say, don't think I want it. Don't think I can handle it. Don't think I'm worthy of it. And I don't think I can do the little bit that Hashem's asking of me to get to that state. At least that's on the surface. Knowing the deeper meaning that they had was also insulting to Hashem. That they didn't see the vision of what the Torah's objective was, which was to go out and transform the world into holiness instead of just letting all that holiness come to you. And so indeed, the day they came back with a bad report and the Jews said, we don't want to go anymore, they started to cry, that day was the 9th of Av. And the 9th of Av is the most tragic day in Jewish history, because God said to the Jewish people at that point, as sometimes we might have said to our kids when they were little, crying for no reason, but I'll give you a reason to cry. If you want a reason to cry, I'll give you a reason to cry, you little baby, crying for no reason. And so they were crying for no reason, and Hashem said, I will make this day a painful day so that you will understand that your crying actually caused it. And so indeed it was the day that both temples were destroyed. The first temple of Solomon was destroyed on the 9th of Av by the Babylonians. The second temple was destroyed on the very same day, 490 years later, by the Romans, Titus and the Romans. And we're still suffering having no temple from that Tisha B'Av on. So every Tisha B'Av, we're thinking that we don't have a third temple yet. You know what else happened on the 9th of Av? On the 9th of Av, there was a terrible calamity that the Jews, when they did rebel against the Romans 100 years after the destruction of the Second Temple with Bar Kokhba. That rebellion was completely quashed and 250,000 Jews were killed on the 9th of Av. And you know what else happened on the 9th of Av? On the 9th of Av, besides for this obviously tragedy of the spies, there was the time that the Jews on the 9th of Av, August 8th, 1492, were kicked out of Spain, the expulsion of Spain on the 9th of Av. The end of the Golden Age, 600 years of Golden Age of Jews in Spain. You know what else happened on the 9th of Av? Archduke Ferdinand was murdered, and there was the beginning of World War I, which in essence was the beginning of World War II, because that never ended. And so the beginning of all the greatest tragedies of the Jewish people took place on the 9th of Av. But we also know that that day will be a day that we'll be able to transform completely into the most joyful of all days. And hopefully, may that happen speedily in our days, and this year should be that one. But that's the danger of creating the energy. And I was sharing this with somebody this morning after the morning prayers. I said the energy we put to the world is the energy Hashem gives us back. And it says in Proverbs, King Solomon says, Kamayim aponim laponim. We are like a face reflecting the image of God. And so when we show a face, Hashem says, I'll show you the same face. And we were crying for no reason. Hashem says, fine, I'll give you a reason to cry. And so we need to have more bitachon, more faith, especially when it comes to the greatest gift that God gave us, which he started the Torah at, I'm showing you heaven and earth first, so that the whole world will know that I didn't just come along, a random God giving the Jews the land of Israel. It's the God who created heaven and earth, and I'm telling you the whole story from beginning of time until the moment I said, this is your land, Jewish people. So no God-believing human being, no Bible-believing human being will ever be able to say that this wasn't the Jewish land. Because God who created the world gave this land to the Jews. And it's the gift that I'm giving you. It's not a punishment. It's not a curse. It's the great gift. Recognize it for what it is, and I will be there to protect you and to ensure your victory. And indeed, when Joshua did finally make it in, because the punishment was, you get what you asked for. You wanted to stay in the desert, fine. Your generation will stay in the desert. And you'll be there until your children grow up and they go in. When Joshua went in, every single war was won without any losses, unless the Jews did something wrong, which they did one or two times. They didn't have the faith and listen to Hashem. They lost a few men. But in the conquest, it happened exactly as it was predicted. Walls miraculously fell down in Jericho. Cities, some of them just ran away. And eventually Jerusalem, the guy says, I'll sell it to you, King David. I'll sell it to you for a few dollars. So every single place was kept as Hashem's gift to us if we deserved it, if we were ready for it. The moment we turned to another God or we did other idolatry, Hashem said, whoa, I'm going to make it a little bit challenging for you and bring you back to that reminder. But for us, the lesson is clear. As we go into a time when the world is perhaps questioning more than ever the Jewish people, the land of Israel, our rights, we have to be very strong, very proud, and not look at ourselves as grasshoppers, intimidated that maybe they're right, maybe we should hide, maybe it doesn't belong to us. We hold up the Torah and say, over 4 billion people in the world believe that God wrote this book, and over 4 billion people in the world testify to the fact that he gave this land to us. Nothing to do with the United Nations, nothing to do with whether or not we have enemies, nothing to do with other people and their fact that they were squatting in the land before we came. That's the end of the story. And I'm sorry that you're bothered by that, but it's ours and there's nothing we can do about it. I'm really sorry. And that's ultimately the life that we need to go through with when it comes to our relationship with Hashem, to prove only to Hashem that we really believe in him and we believe in what he's asked us to do, not in what makes other people happy and what placates somebody that isn't even going to be placated by us saying it. And so I think at this time, especially, our pride and our strength should lead us to that stronger connection to Eretz Yisrael, a stronger connection to the Jewish people in the land of Israel, and ultimately we will all be united to be there together one day very soon. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you for joining us this evening.